bones of the skull. There's going to be two videos on bones of the skull. This one that's going to be with the colored skull, and then another one that's going to be with a skull that doesn't have the color coating on it. So this is the skull bones colored version. When we look at the skull, the first bone that we talk about is the frontal bone, and that's going to be this bone of the forehead right here. So this orange one where it's the top of the eyebrows up to the top of the head. There's a single frontal bone, covers both right and left sides. Then as we move up to the top of the skull here, these two bones are called the parietal bones. We have a right and a left, and they're connected by what we call a suture. And that's one of your terms as well. We've got a suture that's kind of squiggly line between the frontal and the parietals, and then another suture between the right and left parietals. Those do have terms, they have their own names, and we'll come back to those. Okay, so frontal, parietal, then as we move towards the back of the skull, this dark purple bone here that's on the back and the bottom of the skull, okay, that is called the occipital bone. So from front to back, we go frontal, parietal, occipital. Then if we slide around to the side of the skull here, this mustard colored bone, again, there's two of them, one on the right and one on the left, which I just pointed backwards, so right and left. These are called the temporal bone, and this is where your ear is, okay, and the big lump right behind your ear. So it's not actually your temple, the way we think of our temporal should be. Now, if we move forward right along this line here, going to this light purple bone here, this is called the zygomatic bone. And right underneath it, this dark bone here, that's the sphenoid. So attached to the temporal are actually two bones, the sphenoid underneath and the zygomatic on up above. And there's muscle that fits right underneath here, under this piece of bone. As we continue moving forward, this green bone here, and again there's a right and a left, this is called the maxilla. That's the main bone of your face. As we move up to the bridge of the nose, this dark red here, this is going to be the nasal bones. And again, there's a right and a left. It's kind of, if you think about it, as to where your glasses sit on your nasal. Now we get a little tricky, so I'm going to kind of try and zoom in a bit here. If you look right inside the eye, you'll see this little kind of teardrop-shaped pink bone. That's called the lacrimal bone, and that's where your tear duct is. And if we continue trying to look inside the eye, and it's really kind of a hard way to go, maybe you can see it there. Right behind that lacrimal is this kind of dark brown bone, right? And that dark brown bone is called the ethmoid. And that goes between the eyes. It's kind of the nasal sinus area. You can also, if you look inside the nose itself, let's see if I can get you a good view of that. Oh, not wonderful. But inside the nose itself, right up in here, are all ethmoid bones as well. They're all pieces of that same bone where they fold over for the sinus. Okay. While we're still looking in the nose, the next term on your list is going to be the vomer. And that's this dark blue, that's this vertical plate right here inside the nose. So that's the vomer. We're not going to worry about the little light blue bones in there right now. As we switch over to underneath the skull again, let me go ahead and take the mandible off really quick. If we look underneath, you'll see these light blue bones right here at the roof of the mouth. Those are going to be the palatine bones. And that's kind of the back of the roof of your mouth, or the soft palate of your mouth. And then the last bone on our list that's attached to the skull is this guy right here. That's the mandible. Now there's one other bone that's considered a part of the skull, and that's a bone called the hyoid. And it's a little kind of horseshoe-shaped bone that lives inside the neck area, actually. It's the only bone in the body that doesn't touch any other bone. So it's actually kind of hanging out down here, right in this area. And when you look at the non-colored skull, when I go through all the bones on the non-colored skull, you'll see that bone in that video. So you'll get to see that. So those are all the bones on the skull, on the colored skull, to kind of help you. Now be aware, while I will have this out in class, this skull will not be on the exam. So don't try and memorize the bones by the color. You won't be able to do that on the exam.